So Huawei, it's a complicated story. For sure, the founder of Huawei is a former Chinese military officer. For sure. In the early stages of their company, they straight out stole lots of source code from companies like Cisco. For sure, we should be really worried if Huawei is the sole supplier of the infrastructure that supports 5G all around the world, because the Chinese government would have access to everything. And so that leads us to the question is, one, is there a problem with Huawei itself? But then two is, let's just say, and so I think the answer to that first question is probably yes. But then the question two is, let's just say Huawei is a legit company and they're not totally intimately connected to the Chinese government. Can we trust their relationship with the Chinese government? And the Chinese government has a rule that every one of these companies has, the big Chinese national champion companies, they have a Communist Party cell inside of that company. And so I think that we can't think of big Chinese companies just like we think of companies here. We have to think of them as quasi-state actors. And that's why this fight that's happening right now is so important. And that's why, like, when China is out investing in different parts of the world, including Africa, their companies are kind of acting like arms of the government. I mean, they're making all kinds of investments that don't really make sense if you just see, well, this is a company doing something. If you say that this is a company with backing by the state that's fulfilling a function that supports the state, it's a very different model. So I am actually quite concerned about Huawei, and I'm not a fan of everything that this administration is doing. But I think on China, it's important that we need to stand up, and I think pushing back on Huawei is the right thing to do.
I'm uncomfortable about this for two reasons. One, I'm uncomfortable about the Chinese government being inexorably connected to this global superpower in technology, but I'm also uncomfortable that it sets a precedent for other nations to follow, because they're like, look, this is the only way to compete. Because what you were talking about, the investments that Huawei or that the Chinese government makes in these other these countries, and that don't seem to make sense if you're just dealing with a company. Right. But if you're dealing with someone who's trying to take over the world, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and so when we have our companies that you're out in someplace in Africa and you're competing with a Chinese company to do something, build a port or whatever, and you're competing because you are an American company, and so you have your calculus, all right, this is the port, what's the income stream going to be about it, and you have a certain amount that you can bid, because otherwise it becomes a bad investment. But if the Chinese company is that, their calculus is not, is this a good or bad investment? It's what is the state interest in controlling or quasi-controlling this asset? And so that's why we can't project ourselves onto the Chinese. We can't say they're just like us, just different. We have different models, and our models are competing.
Do you think that we should avoid Huawei products like consumers should?
I think the government should very tightly regulate products like Huawei products.
Because some of their network, like routers, they've shown that they're using them to extract information.
And so we have a long history of European, Japanese, South Korean companies that have invested very well. They've outcompeted us, and we allowed the Japanese companies to outcompete our auto manufacturers, and that was fine in the sense in the 1970s our cars had become shit because we had this monopoly. And so I'm all for open competition. I'm all for free trade. It has to be fair. But I think that what China is doing, China recognized as a state that they could use the tools of capitalism to achieve state ends. And I think we need to be very cautious about that.
That's interesting that you compare it to the automotive market, because the consequences are so much different, right?
So much different.
But we do have a model to go on. We could see what happened. We made shitty cars. The Japanese took over. Yeah.
And then we made better cars. Like I have a rental car here in Los Angeles, and I went to the rental car place at LAX, and they had all of the different cars, and there was like a Nissan and a Toyota, and there was a Cadillac. And I thought, I said, I'm going to go with the Caddy. So it's a great car, and so I think
they're amazing.
They're incredible.
Yeah, American cars are very good now.
They're great. Yeah. And so I'm all for competition, but I just feel like what some Chinese companies are doing, it's not competition. It's they have become, not all of them, but quasi-state actors. And if that's what they're doing, I think we need to respond to them in that way.
Interesting. What else should we be concerned with? Should we be concerned with anything that North Korea is doing?
Oh, absolutely. So I have spent a lot of time in North Korea.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up.
Yeah, so I advised the North Korean government on the establishment of special economic zones, which I certainly believe if North Korea could have economic growth and integrate into the rest of the world, that would be great. And so
when was this that you went over
This
there?
was in 2015, but I've been there twice. Crossed the border from China and zigzagged the country by land, visited 10 or 12 different sites, so spent almost 2 weeks by land. So I've really
What was that like?
Incredible. I mean, North Korea, one, it's the most organized place I've ever seen. I mean, there's not anywhere. There's like on the side of the road, the stones are all raked. There's not a stick. Every little line is drawn. It's like total control. There were in the agricultural areas, there were very few machines and very few farm animals. So I saw people pulling plows. Like, usually have the animal in front of the plow and the person behind. Here, there were like 2 people in front of the plow and 1 person behind. The people were the animals. And we would go and visit these, just because a lot of the animals got eaten when they had their famine. And so we visited these different sites for these special economic zones, and they would say like what they had done and what they were thinking about doing. And I would say like, do you know anything about the market? Like, what are you going to sell here? And they said, well, we know about clearing land and building a fence. And then we went to Pyongyang, and I spoke to about 400 economic planners, and I said, look, I know you have these plans to do these special economic zones. It's totally going to fail. The way it's going to work, you have to connect to the market economy. You have to empower your workers. You need information flow. How else are you going to learn and adapt? So North Korea, it's a really dangerous place. And now it's even more dangerous because President Trump, it was this kind of nonsensical Hail Mary in these meetings with Kim Jong-un. There was never any indication that the North Koreans were planning on giving up their nuclear weapons. They never said they would. It's the last thing they would do because their goal is survival. And so there was this kind of head fake, which was like a PR stunt to be able to say, all right, we're having these meetings. And of course, the North Koreans weren't ever going to give up their nuclear weapons. They're still not. So now things are ramping up. So North Korea in the last couple of days has started firing missiles again. The United States today, U.S. military seized a North Korean ship. So we're going back to this very dangerous place. And so I think we really need to do a much better job. We need much more North Korea it's really hard, and these guys are really smart. I mean, they are very. People say, well, these guys are poor. They must not be smart. I mean, we're playing cards with them. We've got the whole deck. They don't have anything, one card, and yet they're in the game. They're in the game. They're holding us to a stalemate, and it's really worrying.